free webinar on ISO 14064 as well as the carbon audit. This is one of the knowledge transfer initiative initiated by CCC. This is the first webinar we are organizing for, and we are planning for a monthly regular program, possibly on the second Saturdays. This is one of the idea that we have generated in the last council meeting, and accordingly in the first session that we are launching for today. And based on your interest, suggestions, we are looking for the various other topics on the other standards, not repeatedly 9, 14, 45. Other than that, lot of new standards, new requirements are coming up to equip our knowledge. These kind of webinars are important, and we are having eminent faculties, trainers are here. So it will be a knowledge sharing platform for every one of you. And I am welcoming Mr. Ram Kumar. He is the Vice President of Chennai Consultant Consortium, and he is based at Chennai. And a brief introduction about him. Basically, he is having 22 years of experience in quality, health and safety, environment management system, and with his background of knowledge and experience, he is taking up a new standards. Whatever the new standards are upcoming, he will be the pioneer to take it across. And he is a lead auditor as well as the lead instructor for IATF 9014, this 27,000, 45,001. And he is doing a lot of sustainability standard audit as well as the social complaints audit also. He is regularly auditing for Fair Trade USA, RSPO, YESS, Bone Surgo, and carbon footprint standard. And he is the very demand in for this kind of special standards. He is conducting a lot of trainings regularly, and he is having a strong expertise in training and skill development. And I welcome Mr. Ramkumar sir to take upon this first session on this carbon footprint. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Girdharan sir. Thank you. Is my voice audible?
Yes, yes.
This is a bit low. If you can have some increase some volume, you can come near to the mic, that will be great.
Now is it okay?
I think okay for us.
Yeah. So let me share my slide. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening to all. And today's topic, as already we are all aware that it is ISO 14064, which is a much sought after standard now, which is carbon footprint. And as we are all aware, there is a lot of climate change which is we are experiencing now. I think everyone will acknowledge that fact, because we are seeing there is a increase in the temperature, 2 degrees to 3 degrees. We are experiencing that, and a lot of natural calamities are happening. Recently, we had a landslide in Wayanad, and so many other calamities are happening in and around. We are experiencing that now, and we are more concerned about it. So climate change, climate is a pattern of variation in temperature, wind, precipitation, and other meteorological variables. And because of this, there are a lot of changes which is happening in the globe, and the glaciers are melting, and the sea level is rising day by day, and this is going to be a big alarm in the future. And as we are all aware of the terminology global warming, and this has been the talk of the scientists fraternity, and every environmentalist is more concerned about the climate change because of global warming. And it is basically, this is contributed by the human activity in the universe, and we are all aware what are all the various activities we are doing, how it contributes for this climate change. And in the last century, we have been seeing from this particular picture, it clearly depicts the impact of the global warming, where in 1914 in Alaska, there is a glacier, which you are seeing on the left-hand side. Now, in 2004, from the same angle, another photograph was taken, wherein you can see the difference. So I'm just showing some couple of photos of the change which is happening in these 3 decades, what has happened in the globe. And this is a Wayanad landslide which we have experienced recently. Lost so many lives and also a lot of loss, economic loss also in that region is reported. It is all because of the greenhouse gases. That is the contributing factor, it is said. So the greenhouse gases is, in short term, it is called as GHGs, which are the components in the atmosphere that contribute to the greenhouse effect. And it is naturally occurring GHGs include water vapor and ozone, that is O3. And human activity can add to the concentration of these gases in the atmosphere. The key GHGs from the human activities are listed here, which is carbon dioxide predominantly, methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur hexafluoride, HFC, which is hydrofluorocarbon, and PFCs, which is perfluorocarbons. So these are the greenhouse gases which is emitted from the globe, which is actually depleting the ozone layer, and wherein we are experiencing these type of aberrations, and which results in the greenhouse effect. We tell that as a greenhouse effect, wherein the ultraviolet rays is entering into the universe, which is actually creating a lot of mutations in plant and animals, and thereby new diseases are reported, new type of infections are reported, and which is creating a havoc on both the flora and the fauna. So this is a big concern for everybody in the world now. And so based on this, the facts of the climate change, there are key findings from the IPCC, which is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate, which meets regularly. And recently, in 2023, last year, there was a meeting in which they have given the recommendations, and 234 scientists from the physical science of climate change and 270 scientists on impacts of adaptation and vulnerability to climate change and 278 scientists on climate change mitigation. They all participated and contributed on their areas of research, and the findings were discussed exhaustively. And wherein they have come out with a report, which is IPCC synthesis report. It provides the most comprehensive, best available scientific assessment of the climate change. This is all in the public domain. Everybody can go and access this report. It is available in the IPCC website. Some of you who are interested, after this presentation, you can go back and Google it and download the report and have a detailed study of all these assessment reports. That is 6th assessment report, AR6. So which is actually, they have given some 10 viewpoints, which I'm presenting now for the audience here. The first point is human-induced global warming of 1.1 degrees Celsius has spurred changes to the Earth's climate that are unprecedented in the recent human history. So this is the first finding they have given, and wherein they say the rising sea levels are a big alarm, and it is creating a dangerous pose to the entire world. And the West Antarctic and the Greenland ice sheets would melt almost completely and irreversibly. This is a great concern. It not only melts, it is irreversible. That means it can't go back to the original state over many thousands of years, causing sea levels to rise by several meters. That is why we have flash floods in the rivers, and it is gushing and it is creating havoc. And naturally, it reaches the sea, and the sea level is going up. And countries like Maldives, small islands, they are all very much worried that the sea level increase will submerge their entire country itself. They have raised a huge concern about all this. And this is a pictorial representation of that, of the evidence of global warming already underway. So you can see in this picture how from the mountains, the glaciers to the sea, the marine. So the marine organisms, the marine plants and animals, they also get affected because of this, because of the ocean acidification, which is at the highest level at the last 26,000 years. So this is all creating a more great concern. And this is all in the public domain, which is available now for us to see. And the second viewpoint is the climate impacts on people and the ecosystems are more widespread and severe than expected, and future risk will escalate rapidly with every fraction of a degree of warming, which is described as an atlas of human suffering and a damning indictment of failed climate leadership. So it has been stated by the UN Secretary General with a great concern. And one of the AR6 most alarming conclusion is that the adverse climate impacts are already more far-reaching and extreme than anticipated. So whatever it was anticipated in AR5, which happened way back in 2013, now AR6 in 2023, a lot of things has happened, and whatever we anticipated in 2013 when the AR5 was tabled, now in AR6 it is all alarming, and it is a great concern for everyone. About half the global population currently contests with severe water scarcity for at least 1 month per year. So it is already we are experiencing in India and many parts of the country we are facing acute water shortage. And there is a vector-borne diseases such as malaria, dengue, malaria, Nile virus, and Lyme disease. So these type of diseases are also sporadic increase is there, and climate change has slowed the improvements in agriculture productivity, which is a great concern. The crop productivity is shrinking. So thereby they say they have categorized into the risk from rising the temperatures, leading to the biodiversity loss, drought, food security, fires, and extreme heat and sea level rise and the floods and coral reef decline in the coral reefs. So this is all creating a major concern, and a lot of scientific community is working on all these areas day and night. And the remaining viewpoints I have listed down in this slide for you for the benefit of our audience. So adaptation measures can effectively build resilience, but more finance is needed to scale the solutions. This is it is actually more of involvement of financial expenses will be more, and it need more money to invest to really state of condition. And some climate impacts are already so severe that they cannot be adapted to, leading losses and damages. Some things are irreversible, so we have to undergo the loss and we have to compensate the damages which is caused because of this. And the global GHG emissions peak before 2025 in 1.5 degrees Celsius aligned pathways. So there is a marginal increase, they say, between 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius will be there in the average temperature, which is going to create a big impact on the flora and the fauna in this universe. Already we are experiencing that, we have started experiencing now. And the world must rapidly shift away from burning fossil fuels, the number one cause of the climate crisis. This has been found out, and AR6 has come out very clearly. In fact, in a subsequent slide, I'll show you what are all the things to come out of this. One of the things is to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels. So we need to work on it, and we also need urgent system-wide transformations to secure a net zero climate resilient future. And carbon removal is now essential to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And climate finance for both mitigation and adaptation must increase dramatically this decade. And climate change, as well as our collective efforts to adapt to and mitigate it, will exacerbate inequity should we fail to ensure a just transition. So we should gear up ourselves. So this is not to create a panic among the minds of all the people who are attending this session. My intention is to highlight the danger that what we are in now, so that our future generation should be safer, and we should create a beautiful universe for them to live, not only for human beings but also for the other organisms of the plant kingdom. So these are some pictorial representations of the points discussed just now. Ecosystem based adaptation can protect lives and livelihoods. So we should go back to the nature lead the simple natural way of living, where we in our country it was the order of the day long ago. Again, we have to go back to the basics and protect our own environment. And GHG emissions reductions needed to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach. So how we can do it? We should have some milestones that countries have agreed on certain actionable points, actionable targets, and now every country is started implementing these things, and India is also part of it and partner to it. And CO2 emissions from existing and planned fossil fuel infrastructure put 1.5 degrees Celsius out of reach. So lofty plans are there wherein the awareness has to be created among all the people, and management, as a management consultant, it becomes our vital role. Yeah, because we are playing a major connectivity between the industry and the standards and these type of certifications and also the sustainability programs. So we need to have a larger insight into all these things, get into the basics of it, and try to gather more knowledge on this. So the purpose of these sessions is to kindle the or provoke the thoughts or the thought process among the consultants who are fraternity, so that we create this awareness in the industry. Now, a lot of things have become mandatory and part of the regulatory mechanism also now. It is all falling in line. And we need to gear up ourselves and enhance our knowledge. So that's the purpose of conducting this type of sessions. So as I already highlighted, these are the 10 solutions needed to mitigate climate change. So we need to come out of the fossil fuel like coal, retire the coal plants and invest in clean energy and efficiency. Already we are on the job. A lot of windmills, a lot of solar green energy initiatives are being taken up at a larger scale. Retrofit and decarbonize buildings, eco-friendly green buildings are on the cards now. Decarbonize cement, steel and plastics. Bioplastics are also being used now. A lot of emphasis is there on bioplastics. We can see EVs flying on the roads and increase public transport, biking and walking. Of course, this is not, in my experience, I'm seeing a lot of people are going on cars, even in a single passenger going in a car. We could see this even now. So I think a lot of awareness has to be created for using the public transport, and decarbonize aviation and shipping, and halt deforestation and restore degraded lands, reduce food loss and waste and improve agricultural practices, and eat more plants and less meat. So these are all the solutions needed to mitigate the climate change. And of course, we should have some actionable points and targets for achieving all this. And this is the approaches on land and approaches in the ocean. So ocean is a major portion in the universe, as we are all aware in the globe. So not much of an awareness is among the people about the ocean, or what all the impact which is being created because of the pollution or the pollutants what we generate, which directly goes and affect the marine kingdom. And so coastal wetland restoration, seaweed cultivation, nutrient fertilization. So all these are given there. I'm not just reading it out. So we need to have a eco-friendly approach both on the land and in the oceans. So on projections for future climate change, it has also been projected in AR6, which has been a summary for the policy makers 2023. So how to reduce this, we need to really work upon it. And potential climate changes impact, what and all it can have on the health, agriculture sector, forest and water resources and coastal areas and species and natural areas. Endangered plants list should not go up, and also endangered animals also, the list should not go up. So it is in our hands only to maintain and sustain the biodiversity of an area. So these are all the various sequentially I listed out the global response to the climate change. First of its kind happened in First World Climate Conference in way back in 1979, and in 2023 the IPCC summit has happened, so which I have not mentioned here. Sorry for that. And 2019 and 2019 we had the IPCC set up. It was set up in 2019, and IPCC is really contributing a lot towards the climate change and also the global warming. And IPCC, a short note on IPCC, so that people who are not aware of this, first time hearing this about this organization, I thought I'll have a slide on this. So it is established by the UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, under the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. And in this, 195 member countries are there, and it reviews and assesses the most recent scientific, technical, and socio-economic information, and thousands of scientists contribute to the work of IPCC. In fact, many Indian scientists are also involved in IPCC, and there are a lot of three working groups: WG1 and WG2 and WG3. WG1 basically works on the physical science basis of the climate change, and WG2, it works on the climate change impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability. And WG3, work group 3, mainly focuses on mitigation of the climate change. Just now we saw the 10 mitigation proposals which has been proposed by IPCC. This is from the WG3, work group 3. So the latest report, AR6, as I already told you, is available in the public domain. So next organization is the UNFCCC, that is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And this is again a very important organization, which is the ultimate goal of this convention is to stabilize GHG concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference from the climate system. That means what? The endangered species, the list should not go up, and even in the list which is there, in the brim of the extinction, we should try to save those flora and fauna from their common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. It is an independent body. It is also working for the climate change, so undertake different responsibilities. Here also in the website, if you can go to UNFCCC website, a lot of more insights you can get, and you can access the details further. And one is which was under Kyoto first commitment period from 2008 to 2012, developed countries must reduce their emissions by an average of 5% below 1990 levels by 2012. And certain developed nations included in the targets, and a second commitment period was also decided, which was between 2013 to 2020, and major several who are the emitters in the developed world, they are not signed up. So Kyoto covers only the 14% of the global emissions, because there are a lot of differences of opinion between the Kyoto Protocol and we are not being able to evolve the Kyoto Protocol. That is why many are parties to it, and still, but there is a new global agreement which has been made in the Kyoto Protocol, which targets the emissions trading, clean development mechanism, and joint implementation. And other than this, there are national, regional policies and actions with respect to specific nations. So like carbon trading schemes are there in Europe and New Zealand and other countries, and mandatory reporting is there in UK, and taxes or incentives are there in Australia and also part of UK. And there is a verified carbon scheme which is there, and national carbon offset standard in Australia and US registries, and legislation targeting emissions from equipment. Even we are having a BS compliant vehicles now. We are all aware of it. Now BS6 compliant is in vogue. Still more improvement. A lot more stringent restrictions are in the manufacturing of the vehicles, which is actually the cause for pollution and the emissions. So global carbon pricing schemes are also there in practice, which is actually the emission trading system is there, which is implemented and scheduled for implementation in some countries, which has been implemented in many countries. And there is a carbon tax which is implemented as scheduled. So, and there is a carbon plan, 80% emissions in UK. They said they will reduce it, and they have a targeted year of 2050 against their 1990 levels, and they have a carbon budget, and also EU trade and climate change agreements, and these are all the initiatives which is happening around the world, and we are also part of it. Many products are being exported from India to particularly European Union, and they have to comply. A carbon neutral certification is mandatory now. Everybody is emphasizing on that. The industry is also slowly getting this awareness, and they are falling in line to produce a product which is carbon neutral. Okay, so the GHG reporting, the monitoring and reporting of GHG emissions can be undertaken at different levels. It can be based on the national inventories or the corporate inventories or single installations or the product and services life cycle footprints, or a project or a building or an event organized by Dell at Bangalore, wherein they opted for a carbon neutral certification for that event alone. They can place in a 5-star hotel in Bangalore. So the entire event was audited, and what is the amount of waste that is getting generated, it was sink. All these were calculated, and so it was an event which was audited. So it is also possible, and even for its levels. So we may wonder whether all this can be part of a carbon trading or a carbon credit or a carbon neutral projects. Yes, it can be. It can be done. It has become regulatory in many industries. They have imposed, government of India has also imposed regulations, and many are voluntary, and it depends on the nature of the industry where they are in. Why we should report GHG emissions? What is the necessity? The fundamental necessity is to measure, report, and reduce the GHG emissions. There is a lot of the concept of carbon trading. Just now I was explaining, it is there. It will reduce the cost. It will help the management or the organizations to manage the risk, and it has a competitive advantage over others. So if you are a carbon neutral, producing a carbon neutral product, naturally you will get a premium price for that, and naturally you will have an edge over your own competitors in the market. And there are customer pressure, there are investor pressures, supply chain pressures, and government pressures, and also there are legal and statutory and regulatory requirements which is compelling the industry to fall in line and report the GHG emissions. So these are all the reasons why we should report GHG emissions. And organizational GHG inventory is very important. Emissions associated with the life cycle of a specific product or a service, we have to capture. And normally for a product carbon footprint, it is measured in CO2 equivalent per unit of product. That is a reporting methodology, where every other emissions are also converted to carbon dioxide equivalent, and it is calculated based on that. And product, this is an example for an iPad, where there is a total GHG emissions is 130 kilograms CO2 equivalent. So it's just to indicate how in the production, if you see the pie chart, the production contributes for more GHG emissions, followed by the customer use and the transport, and last but not least the recycling, which is 2%. So GHG projects activity or set of activities intended to reduce GHG emissions, increase the storage of carbon, or enhance GHG removals from the atmosphere. Predominantly, this is getting addressed in ISO 14064 Part 2. See, Part 2 basically it deals with the projects, GHG emission from the projects. So I'll explain it to you in detail little from now. So the carbon neutrality is a condition which there is no net increase in the global emission of greenhouse gases associated with the subject. That means the GHG emissions is zero. It is totally nil. So further, we need to measure the GHG emissions as of now, what is the level, and come out with an action plan with the target dates, so that to reduce these GHG emissions and offset and declare that we have achieved the carbon neutrality. Okay. So the internationally recognized standards one on the left hand side, you can see the ISO 14064 series, and the right hand side, you will be able to see the WRI, which is the World Resources Institute, and WBCSD, which is World Business Council for Sustainable Development, GHG protocols. So what is the difference between these two? Why we should have these two sets of standards? One side we have ISO, the other side we have this WRI and WBCSD GHG protocol. So the standards and guidelines, there are no major or fundamental differences between these two. The GHG protocol is more of descriptive in nature, and therefore a company reporting to ISO 14064 requirements could benefit from the additional guidance and context offered by the GHG protocol. The GHG protocol does not provide a standard for how the verification process should be conducted. So this is a major difference. And both the standards are program or policy neutral. It is for use by any organization. Any type of organization can adopt these two things. So the type of GHG standard, the difference is the ISO with the GHG protocol, ISO 14064 part 1, it deals with the computing the GHG emissions, calculating the GHG emissions. So in GHG protocol, corporate accounting and reporting standard, corporate value chain scope 3 accounting and reporting standard. So for projects, as I already told you, it is 14064 part 2. In GHG protocol, it is for project accounting. And for product carbon footprint, it is ISO 14067. In GHG protocol, it is product lifecycle accounting and reporting standard. And for verification, ISO 14064-3 provides the guidelines for verification of GHG emissions, whereas there is no such verification standard in GHG protocol. Okay. So the GHG protocol is a corporate accounting and reporting standard developed by WBCSD and WRI. And there are steps in inventory development. It establishes the boundaries, the GHG emission sources, stationary combustion, mobile combustion, process stations, and also the GHG activity data is captured, and GHG emission factors are taken into consideration, and GHG emissions are calculated. Reporting tools are available. I have given the website link here, and the tools are available with in that particular website, where you can download and use that tool for calculating the GHG emissions using the GHG emission factors. But in ISO 14064 family, it is actually providing a clarity and consistency for quantifying, monitoring, reporting, and validating or verifying the GHG emissions. So this is the main underlying thing, and it enhances the environmental integrity of GHG quantification. And also it enhances the credibility, consistency, and transparency of GHG quantification, monitoring, reporting, verification, and validation. And it facilitates the development and implementation of the GHG management strategies and plans. And of course, it facilitates the ability to track the performance and progress in reduction of GHG emissions or increase in GHG removals, and also facilitates the development and implementation of mitigation actions, because the risk assessment is part of this, where we'll be identifying the risk associated in GHG emissions, and naturally we have to come out with a mitigation action plan for this emission reduction or removal enhancements. So this application of the ISO 14064 family standards includes corporate decisions such as identifying emission reduction opportunities and increasing profitability by reducing energy consumption, and carbon risk management, identification and management of risk and opportunities, and voluntary initiatives such as participation in voluntary GHG registries or sustainability reporting initiatives. I mean, every organization can have their own sustainability management plan, wherein they can have milestones for a long-term plan as well as a short-term plan for achieving the carbon neutral. And regulatory or government GHG programs such as credit for early action or agreements or national and local reporting initiatives. So 14064 part 1, it is a guidance at the organizational level for quantification and reporting of GHG emissions and removals. So it is precisely the calculation part, and it requirements for the design, development, management, reporting, and verification of organizations, GHG inventory, and also GHG program neutral. And if there is a requirement of ISO 14064 prohibits an organization or a GHG project proponent from complying with the requirement of the GHG program, the requirement of the GHG program takes precedence. It means very clearly it states the GHG protocol, if it is mandatory, it takes the precedence, and ISO 14064. In fact, it is prohibiting an organization or a GHG project proponent from complying with the requirement. So it provides requirements but not actual methodology. So as like other ISO standards, it is only highlighting the requirement, shall requirement, and it is not actually providing any tool for actual methodology to be followed. And the contents of the standard is scope, terms and definitions, principles. Principles are very important. I'll highlight those principles also. GHG inventory design and development, GHG inventory components, and GHG inventory quality management, and reporting of GHG, and organizational role in verification activities. So it is the entire content is restricted to reporting and preparing the organization for verification. So it provides credibility and assurance to GHG claims and requirement for some schemes and increase in demand in third-party verification. So it really prepares the organization to face the third-party verification. So 14064 part 1, it actually helps the organization to clearly come out with their GHG claims so that it can be verified by a third party. So this picture shows very clearly the linkage between 14064 part 1, 14064 part 2, and 14064 part 3. If you see this, the GHG inventory documentation and reports are there in both 14064 part 1 and part 2. Part 2 is for projects, part 1 is for the regular activities of an organization. And in both there are the GHG assertion and verification level of assurance consistent with the needs of the intended user. And in 14064 part 3, there is a verification and the validation process, which is part of part 3 requirement. Okay. And 14065, it is actually giving the requirements for validation or verification bodies. What are the competencies required, and how the certifying body or the verification body, what is the prerequisites for a certification body to actually do the verification or the validation of the GHG. All those are outlined in the 14065 standard. And use of 14065 and 14063 to verify is to against any GHG standard, any methodology, schemes, accredited or non-accredited. Normally it ensures consistency and quality of verification services. And ISO 14065 is for accreditation purpose, sector or scheme accreditation. And the principles, 5 accounting principles are there. They are relevance, completeness, consistency, accuracy, and transparency. So these are the underlying principles of ISO 14064. So every organization is assumed that they are strictly adhering to these principles. And there are organizational and operational boundaries which has to be defined by the organization when they are opting for 14061. For example, here if you see there are organizational boundaries and operational boundaries. Organization that can be have multi-sites also. So any organization which is having a multi-site has to clearly state what are those sites which is included as part of the scope of study. And operational boundaries, what are all the nature of activities which is being taken up for certification or for accounting purpose or calculation purpose. If that is clearly mentioned, that is the operational boundary which is talked about here. And organizational boundaries, there are two approaches, equity share approach and a control approach. Equity share approach is nothing but the organization accounts for its portion of GHG emissions or removals from respective facilities according to its equity share. So it may be a partnership company, or it may be fully, it may have some control, or partially it may have control. Depending upon that, the equity share approach will apply. And the control approach is what are all the facilities and the GHG emissions which is being emanated from all this, whether they have the financial control over it or they have the operational control. So that must be clearly specified as to what are the financial control they, whether they have any financial control or they only operate and they don't have any financial perspective attached to those nature of activities being carried out, which is part of their responsibility. So that is the control approach. And in operational boundaries, there are three scopes which is clearly defined, commonly used in carbon accounting: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1 is direct GHG emissions from owned or operated activities. And scope 2 is energy indirect GHG emissions, which is a purchased energy by the organization. That is scope 2. Scope 3 is other indirect GHG emissions, other emissions related to activities of the organizations, but not under their control. So that is the scope 3. So any organization have to mention it very clearly in the scope while defining the operational boundaries, whether they are taking into consideration the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, whichever is relevant or applicable as the case may be. So here, the scope 3 is actually optional, but the scope 1 and scope 2 is mandatory. So scope 3, here it is given. Other indirect emissions may include employee travel, maybe a employee may travel in a train or a flight or in a ship. So those emissions, whether we have to take into consideration how many trips the employee has made, official trips, official travel, and packaging, what are the types of packaging materials that is being used, what are the emissions which is applicable to that, supplier emissions. We are engaging some suppliers, their carbon emissions also, whether we should consider or not, or raw materials or end of life, third party distribution or use of product. This is all called as, comes under the scope 3, which is optional. And scope 1 is direct emissions, which is fugitive in nature or fuel, which is directly used in the facility or own transport or the process emissions because of the nature of their work or the activity. That is comes under scope 1, which is direct emissions. Scope 2 is energy indirect emissions, purchased heat or cooling, or purchased electricity or purchased steam. So these all comes under scope 2. So that is why it is given in a different color. Scope 1 and scope 2 is mandatory and scope 3 is optional. Okay. So for the carbon footprint, for the product footprint, the scopes includes emissions from all scopes, although product and specific and certain exclusions are there. Here also the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, the similar categories are there. But for the product emissions, for the product footprint, ISO 14067 is applicable, which is the product footprint standard. So sources of emissions, different sources of emissions are given here. I'm not reading out all the things. I'll definitely circulate the slides so every one of you who is attending this webinar. And there's a stationary combustion, mobile combustion, process emissions, and fugitive emissions. These are the different sources of emissions. So we need to calculate, we need to have a inventory of all this. And GHG gases covered by the Kyoto Protocol. A list of gases are given here. And this is a GWP is a measure wherein the GHG is actually calculated. It is all available in the public domain. Now IPCC AR6 2023 also has come out with a GWP, global warming potential data, where we can take it up for emission factor when we are calculating. This will be definitely essential while we do the carbon equivalent calculations. And quantification methodologies can be classified into the following types: calculation based on GHG activity data multiplied by GHG emission or removal factors. The use of models, whether IPCC guidelines we are using or any other DEFRA or any other guidelines we are using, we need to specify that, and what is the measurement, and also the combination of measurement and calculations. And where to find these methodologies for inventories? There are IPCC guidelines are there, and also GHG protocol and UK government guidance, and sector specific tools are also there for some oil sector and oil and gas sector. And there are industry associations like steel, cement, semiconductors, and petrochemicals. So, many more are getting added to that industry associations now. And the scheme specific, that is emission trade systems, EU, That is also the reason. But these are all the sources where you can find out the methodologies for inventories. See, that is why I said very clearly, ISO 14064 is not a prescriptive standard. It never prescribes anything. It is for the organization discretion to take it up, adopt any of these methodologies applicable legally, or there is a legal requirement, then they have to adopt the methodology specified in the legal requirement, or they can choose their own methodology from these uh, sources. So the GHG protocol is a corporate accounting and reporting standard. So I'm just showing the screenshot. This is DEFRA. DEFRA is Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in UK, and they have also come out with the environmental reporting guidelines, including mandatory GHG emissions reporting guidance. So many organizations, they use DEFRA also as a referral standard for calculating the GHG emissions. And GHG inventory guidance are also available in, it is all in public domain. You can download and you can go through that. Apart from this, there may be some local guidance which we need to take it into consideration while doing the GHG calculations. And normally the quantification methodology is used as activity data multiplied by the emission factor, the quantity used and also with the intensity. So this is the normal formula which is used for calculating the GHG emissions. I am not going into the further details because this is only an awareness session. I restrict myself to this, and I'll just highlight a few things: how to collect the activity data, scope for scope 1, for scope 2, scope 3 is given here, and what are the common approaches for activity data, and also selection or development of GHG emission or the removal factors, organization specific factors, and also published emission factors we have to take into consideration. And emission factors we have to derive from recognized sources, appropriate for the source concerned, and current at the time of quantification. This is very important. For example, the latest emission factor, what is it available in the GWP? We need to download that and we have to take that. We should not take a past data and calculate and do it wrongly. So a word of caution is given here, and it should be accurate, reproducible, and uncertainty accounted, and consistent with intended use. And reporting emissions dependent on type of the reporting and the standard, and corporate inventory is expressed in absolute emissions and can be broken down by the scopes. And life cycle footprints normally expressed per functional unit, for example, X tons carbon dioxide equivalent per ton of product. Like that only they report. And GHG projects, that is for the ISO 14064 part 2, report reductions in emissions or increased removals resulting from the project. So that is for so there are various drivers for GHG reporting. So I'm not going into the much of the details of it. 140642 is nothing but the guidance at the project level for quantification, monitoring, and reporting of GHG emissions. And 14065 is the standard against which many CBs are accredited, like SGS and other CBs are also accredited. It dictates the management system. 14066 is the competency requirements for GHG validators and verifiers. This is very important. Whoever is a qualified validator and verifier has to comply with the requirements of 14066, wherein the competency requirements are given in detail. Okay. And 140643 is nothing but the verification and the validation part. So verification process, again here the principles of 140643 is independence and ethical conduct, maybe fair presentation and also due professional care. And verification process is I put it in a nutshell here in this slide, wherein it starts with the preparation and agreement on the level of assurance. This is very important. Level of assurance is very important. And the objective criteria and scope and materiality. These are all very unique words used in this standard. Some of you may be familiar with these words. Some of you may not be familiar. Please go through the standard. You will get the meaning for all this. For these terms like materiality, level of assurance, and objective, of course, everybody will know, and criteria and scope also. Many people will be, as a management consultant, will be aware of these words. But level of assurance and materiality, I'll explain it a little in detail in the subsequent slides. So the next followed with the preparation is the approach development. What is the approach we are going to follow, and verification sampling plan? What should be the sample? And followed by this actual verification process itself, assessment of the GHG information system and assessment of the GHG data and information, assessment against the defined or accepted criteria, and evaluation of the GHG assertion. And last, we have to issue the verification statement. That is very, very important. And that is the outcome or the output of this entire process itself. So in the verification process, carry out the contract review, identify the scope, complexity, risk and time requirement, prepare and issue the proposal. So verification agreement has to be, we have to have an agreement with the client at the beginning itself. And this is how it works. Materiality, criteria, objective, scope and level of assurance must be defined clearly in the beginning itself in the preparation stage. And objectives, normally it is may also involve carbon neutrality, but the basic objective is to verify at the beginning of the verification process what is the benchmark, what we are going to take, carbon inventories. That is very important. Criteria normally will be the government specific criteria or the GHG programs, EU ETS or 140641 part 1. Or if no standard is applicable, maybe there is a GHG management plan is there, you can also verify against the plan. Okay. And criteria also should not verify against ISO 14064 part 1 alone. Maybe WRA GHG protocol is okay. We should include that methodology and standard. So we need to verify, cross-verify which sector is being, the GHG activities are being verified. We need to take into consideration the applicable legal and also the industry domain specificities. If anything is applicable, we have to consider that also in this stage. And company methodology is okay for verification criteria or must verify against the requirements of 140641 and not the principles. And whatever the criteria, the same verification is approached in ISO 14064 part 3. So part 3, there is a scope is also clearly defined in the agreement. And the level of assurance, there are absolute assurance is not attainable. So use of judgment, use of testing, inherent limitations of control and qualitative nature of some types of evidence that needs to be produced. So there are the level of assurance, we should also say there are two types of assurance, reasonable and limited. Reasonable assurance is gives more confidence, concluded in a very positive way. Limited assurance is less confidence, concluded in a negative way. So it determines the depth of testing in verification. So degree of confidence is required to make such a conclusion. That is why the competency level of the verifier and the validator is prescribed in the ISO by the ISO organization itself for this. So a verification statement, which is very important, which is the ultimate output. Sorry. A verification statement expressing a reasonable assurance could be worded as follows. Maybe the positive expression is, based on the process and procedures conducted, the GHG assertion is materially correct and is a fair representation of the GHG data and information. Is prepared in accordance with the related international standard on GHG quantification, monitoring and reporting or relevant national standards or practices. This is how the wordings must be there in the level of assurance or the verification statement. So a verification statement expressing a limited assurance, how it should be, it is given here. So it is a negative expression, is not materially correct and is not a fair representation, has not been prepared in accordance with the related international standard. If the verification statement is like this, it is a negative expression and it is a limited assurance. Okay. So which level of assurance? It is chosen to meet the requirements of the intended user, sometimes dictated by the scheme. A reasonable level of assurance, results to be used for offsetting or claim of carbon neutrality, limited level of assurance to be used for internal reporting, internal benchmarking, etc. So public disclosure can use reasonable or limited. It can be either of this. It can be either reasonable or limited level of assurance. Sometimes in year one, organization may opt for limited level of assurance. Maybe year two, they can go for reasonable level of assurance. It is left to the organization also. Materiality, agreement required on level of materiality, typically 5% for the reasonable level of assurance and 10 to 20% for limited level of assurance. And for public GHG assertions involving carbon neutrality should be reasonable assurance and 5% materiality. So some schemes specify materiality levels are even to 5 or 2%. So that is very stringent. And however, it is not specified in ISO 14064 part 1. As I already told you, it is not prescriptive in nature. It is only providing the shall requirements. So again, I am repeating the same slide for everybody's benefit. Verification process, it starts with preparation and ends with the verification statement. So verification statement can be an unqualified statement, a qualified statement, or an adverse statement. There are three types of statement. The verifier can obtain sufficient and objective evidences from the GHG assertion. It can be, and no further qualified opinion is given. It is an unqualified statement. The verifier will give qualified statement to unidentified part in verification statement in conclusion paragraph. However, this statement still meets the requirement of level of assurance. Adverse statement, the verifier was unable to obtain sufficient and objective evidence to form an opinion as to whether the GHG assertion is presented fairly in accordance with the GHG program requirements. It is called as an adverse statement. So there are three types of statement here: unqualified, qualified, and adverse. So normally the verification statement shall be addressed to the intended user or describe the level of assurance, whether it is limited or reasonable, and shall also include the objective scope and criteria, and the GHG assertions were hypothetical or projected or historical in nature, and shall be accompanied by responsible parties GHG assertion, and also include verifier's conclusion of the GHG assertions, including any qualifications or limitations. So the verification statement description will have an introductory paragraph, a scope paragraph, and a conclusion paragraph. For the date of verification statement and verifier contact details and an authorized signature from the verifier. So we are in the last thing. I think already I'm running out of time. Verification process summary, verification agreement, strategic analysis, risk analysis, define verification plan, carry out verification, verification conclusion, and last is the technical review. So it will ensure all new information requests, NIR and CAR, corrective action requests, corrective actions have been closed, and complete the verification report and opinion and submit the pack for technical review for further action. So technical review normally will be carried out by a lead assessor who is also an approved technical reviewer independent of the verification undertaken to ensure internal procedures carried out correctly. Work undertaken meets accreditation requirements. Reviewer agrees with analysis undertaken and agreement reached and authorizes opinion issue. And with that, the process comes to an end. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. I think I have done justice to the topic. Thank you very much. I thank CCC for giving this opportunity to share about the ISO 14064 Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3 standards. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajkumar sir, for your marathon effort covering all the requirements of the standards. And I am very glad to invite Ms. Sahana, who is actually traveling in abroad now, joined for the session. She is having a lot of experience on the carbon footprint. To the highlight, she is currently working as the Global Carbon Council technical expert. That itself can clearly tell that what a qualifications he is having, what type of experience he is having in this profession. Now I am inviting Sahana, please take over the session. And Sahana, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah, please, you can take it.
Okay, I have. I don't know if if I'm visible, but
Yeah, you are well visible.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone, and very good evening. Thank you to CCC for inviting me to speak on few topics here, and thank you, Mr. Ramkumar. It was a very detailed and extensive presentation with some of the topics I'm also covering. As Mr. Giridharan explained, I am Sahana. I'm based in Bangalore, but I work for GCC as a technical expert, and also I majorly work as a GHG validation and verification assessor for the accreditation bodies that are overseeing the operations and functions of validation and verification bodies. So at the moment, I'm traveling. I'm now in some part of Europe, in the airport. So you might listen some disturbance in my background. I'm very sorry for that, but I would like to continue on the session. And to make the signal strength strong, I will also close the video here. Okay, so allow me to share my screen. Just a moment. I'm not sure if you can view my screen. Anybody can see if you can view my screen?
Yes, I can be able
Okay.
to see. You can go to the full screen mode.
Yeah. I think it is there's some issue with the connections here,
Okay.
but it's
Okay,
not
you can proceed.
functioning. Okay,
Okay.
I will try to proceed, because if somebody has questions, or if you cannot view, please feel free to raise your hand. Basically, what I have also seen is Mr. Ramkumar has explicitly explained on all these topics of carbon neutral audits and carbon credits. I've been given this topic to talk about, to touch about what are carbon neutral audits and carbon credits, and how to choose the assurance and validation verification programs. Let me go to the next slide. Okay, here I'm repeating some of the slides here, what Mr. Ramkumar has already explained. I'm so sorry that I was not aware that what is his topic, but I would like to touch a very little brief on these things, probably on the awareness terms. To achieve the carbon neutral footprint verification, this activity is basically done by the certifying bodies, accredited certifying bodies, and this is for the product, the organization, and the businesses that must have a verified footprint to show that their reductions of the previous footprint calculation until the level they want to be assessed, and the reduction plan has to be developed by either for the product or by the organization or for their whole business sector, that details to show their carbon footprint management, and also how they have achieved in every of their activity, including the carbon offsets equivalent to emissions that could not be reduced. And also the verification is done in a process called cradle to grave footprint. This is basically done by the certifying bodies, which means that the entire life cycle of the product is assessed in a way that that has to be disposed. And how this is achieved, I'll go into the next slides. Who can apply basically for these kind of certifications? The medium-sized and the large-sized companies, but there is a criteria that at least 1,000 tons of carbon dioxide emissions in the 3 scopes of carbon neutral protocol, scope 1, 2, or 3. The 3 scopes have already been explained by Mr. Ramkumar, but I will still repeat it here. And would like to emphasize that the companies that fall into these 3 scopes, from the scale of medium size to the large scale, from both the food and the non-food sectors, and several types of products and services can be certified. And these scopes are direct emissions, indirect emissions owned, and indirect emissions that are not owned by the companies. So how do we define these? The scopes under scope 1, the direct emissions are basically for the companies where they emit greenhouse gases due to the activities within the company itself, from their product manufacturing, or their travel, or any of their activities that contribute to the direct emissions of the operations of the companies. And the indirect emissions that fall under scope 2 are the companies which may not be by its own activity contributing to the emissions. And the scope 3 also from the external emissions that are because of the production of those of the activities of those companies, or the products or the services what they deliver. So these are the kinds of different GHGs, or greenhouse gases, that fall into these different 3 kind of scopes that are assessed and certified or validated by the certifying bodies. So the climate neutral certification program is applicable for organizational level, the product level, and the service level. And how to become a carbon neutral certified for any of these three different categories is they are by achieving calculating the carbon footprint and reducing it to the level 0 through a combination of efficiency measures within their house or their activities that are directly impacted to emit to emit greenhouse gases and or supporting the external emission reduction projects. The three categories of companies that fall into these three different scopes can go into carbon neutral certified under this combination, and the climate neutral certification always comes with a label that recognizes the companies that contribute to the climate neutrality. So this is the advantage of going into the climate neutral certification, where they can exhibit themselves that how much they're contributing to the levels of bringing down the carbon emissions. There are 5 different steps usually the certifying bodies follow under this climate neutral protocol for a company for their product or service that has to be certified against the climate neutral. One is the company has to define whether they have to make the whole company or any particular portion of the product or the service that has to come under the carbon neutral protocol, and the emissions that are included under each of these options. And second thing is to measure. How they measure is by identifying the data that is involved in all those activities required for each type of carbon neutral action, and to calculate the total emissions that are contributed out of that particular service or the production of a product. And third process is to target by committing to become themselves a carbon neutral company by achieving a net zero emission. And the fourth level is to reduce. The reduction can be 2 different ways. One is the internal reduction and the external reduction. Internal reduction is by defining mechanisms that could deliver cost-effective emission reductions, carbon emission reductions, by reducing their energy consumptions, by reducing the waste generations, and also by reducing the travel cost, business travel cost. I'm not going too much into details because I know that Ramkumar has already covered, but then if we need more details into it, I can also leave my contact details at the end of the presentation. So whoever needs an in-depth discussion on this, please feel free to contact me at the end. But I'm just touching the base and the foundation of these topics. And as I was telling, these companies, they can use the energy attribute certificates. This is a kind of a certificate which is called as EAC, that tracks about 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy from its production. So the companies can contribute buying into these EACs into their company to meet the immediate levels of targets of reductions of emissions. And the external reduction programs can be by financing into the low carbon sustainable development projects, for example, renewable energy projects, or the different sectoral group of projects that come from sector 1 to sector 15 or 16. I will be explaining those in the further slides. So any company can finance into different kinds of projects that would contribute into bringing down the emission levels, and they can purchase these kind of credits and show that they're contributing to the external reduction. And by that, they're they're announcing themselves as a carbon neutral company as well, and communicating these contributions, what they have done to bring themselves to the carbon neutral levels. That is by clearly messaging through the form of reports to their stakeholders and through the logos on their products that they are carbon neutral, basically to say that they have achieved the levels of carbon neutral. And companies that use these carbon neutral protocol to meet the carbon neutral goal will receive also a logo that they can publicize in their documents, in their brochures, in their websites, and also on the product. So these are the various steps that a company can go into if they want to achieve carbon neutral. stand in the market to say that they're one of the contributors for the carbon neutral companies. This is the touch base about the carbon neutral companies, and I would like to go into some basics about the carbon credits. So carbon credits, I'm putting it in a short form, CCs. Carbon credits, what does it actually mean? It is a unit of measurement for the GHG reductions, which is internationally used, and they enable the entities to offset their own reductions, own emissions by investing into different kinds of ventures that would reduce or remove the greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So the carbon credits, they basically support the climate change mitigation by providing that also provides a little bit of financial support or a kind of an incentive to the companies in achieving the country level targets for bringing down the emission levels. That could also govern how the companies or the organizations match their climate change commitment and reduce their emissions in the near future and also in the present days. These carbon credits can be sold or traded in the carbon markets. And how does the carbon market system function? Carbon market is a system that enables for buying and selling of the carbon credits. There are various buyers in the market, public, private sectors, who contribute into buying and selling into the carbon markets. So carbon markets are divided basically into two types. One is the compliance markets. Compliance markets are nothing but basically they are established by the government and are mandatory for certain types of industries or sectors. And carbon credits are typically allocated or auctioned off by these governments or the companies to buy or sell these credits in the secondary market. I have listed some of the examples here, that is European Union Emissions Trading System or the California Cap and Trade Program. These are just the examples, but there are many different compliance markets that are available internationally and also at the country level. For us at the Indian level, now I would like to also make use of this forum to also explain and introduce that there is a carbon registry that is coming up in the Indian sector. Mr. Anil Jowhary is anyway in the call here. He can also contribute to say how does the Indian carbon registry work. But this is to just introduce and to explain the stakeholders here who are joining in the call that there is a governing council that is established on the Indians. That will be the India's first carbon registry, which is called as ICR. That basically functions. It functions to buy and sell the carbon credits that are reduced or targeted by the small scale industries, basically into the small scale projects. Not the major or the large scale projects, but the small scale projects in India at the moment. And we are trying to bring up this carbon registry in the Indian market to streamline the carbon trading from the Indian projects that will be going into and contributing into the emission reduction levels of India. And there are voluntary markets, which is non-regulated basically by the governments, which is non-regulated market, and it's a company-driven or the individuals-driven. It's a voluntary offset emission reduction market. And the carbon credits for these markets are generated through the projects that reduce or remove greenhouse gases, and these credits can be brought directly from the project developers or through the specialized platforms. There are many voluntary carbon registries that are available in the international level. Anyone can access them, and they can go into buying or trading or selling their carbon credits into those forums. Some of the voluntary markets are also driven by some of the climate change programs. For example, the verified carbon standards, which is called as BCS or VERA, and the gold standards are the climate action reserve. So these are the programs that define their own methodologies and the standards into different sectoral groups that fall from 1 to 16 or 1 to 15, which I'm also going to explain in the future, in the further slides. And they have developed their own methodologies and guidances and help the projects that fall into these different sectoral groups to achieve their emission reductions from introducing a new kind of a technology or quantifying technology or the technology that is already existing. And some of the companies, if they feel that is viable for these kind of different projects to achieve the carbon reductions, they can choose these different climate change programs to register their project into these different platforms or the registries and trade their carbon credits through these registries. And how are carbon credits issued? Basically, the carbon credits are issued for the projects that can be proven to reduce the carbon emissions or absorb it from the environment. So these projects, these different kinds of projects, as I have already said, they fall into different sectoral scopes that are defined either by UNFCCC, and these projects are called CDM, Clean Development Mechanism projects, and the UNFCCC already defines the categories of the projects that fall into 15 different sectoral scopes, running from energy industries until agriculture. And UNFCCC has also defined its own methodologies for these different sectoral scopes for all small scale and the large scale projects, and the guidances. It clearly gives the mechanism how to achieve the emission reductions if the project is viable and successfully validated and successfully verified. And further is also BCS, which more or less follows what UNFCCC's sectoral scopes are, in addition to all the 1 to 13 sectoral scopes of UNFCCC. There are 3 different additional sectoral scopes, which are a little bit differently classified in BCS, that is 14, 15, and 16, falling into AFLU, agriculture, forestry, and land use, livestock and manure management, and carbon capture and storage. It is the same mechanism as just like how UNFCCC operates. Here also BCS operates in the same way. I will explain how the validation and verification program under these different climate change programs can be achieved and registered and verified by the voluntary the verification bodies. There is another platform called the Gold Standard, which has defined its activities into 5 different categories. The projects that are falling into community services, nature-based solutions, renewable energy, water benefits, and waste management. So these are the examples that are existing in the market now on the different climate change programs and the registries defined by these individual climate change programs. But this is not the limit, as I already gave an example of Climate Action Reserve, that is a Mexican-driven protocol. There are other protocols also. One is American Registry, which is basically concentrating on the American projects. And now, as I said, in Indian climate registry is coming up, carbon registry is coming up. So that will also have its own mechanism to accept the projects that are into small scale or the minor projects, and define its own methodology and guidance to approve, to validate and verify the project, and register the carbon credits and to trade the carbon credits to that forum. Further, how these carbon credits are validated and verified. For the carbon neutral projects that are following the carbon neutral protocol, these are done by the certifying bodies, which are accredited by the international accredited bodies. But here, for the carbon credits that needs to be validated and verified for any project that fall into different sectoral scopes, this is done by validation and verification bodies. We usually call them as VVBs or DOEs, designated operational entities. So these validation and verification bodies, basically the job is to issue, is to validate the project and to see in the verification if the projects are eligible for the carbon credits and ensure the credibility and integrity of the project. So these validation and verification bodies, there are many validation and verification bodies in India at the moment, which are also the certifying bodies. They are responsible for validating and verifying the emission reduction projects to meet specific criteria and standards, basically defined by these different climate change programs, starting from UNFCCC CDM, PCS Gold Standard, Climate Action Reserve, American Carbon Registry, and all this, for issuing the respective carbon credits. So the validation process, it is nothing but evaluating or assessing the project's documents, the applied methodology by these projects, and the monitoring systems defined as regulated by the methodologies themselves, and the emission reduction calculations. So the VVBs will do an initial assessment of these to determine if the project meets the necessary requirements of the climate change program that is adopted by the project. So VVBs issue a validation report with a positive or the negative opinion at the end of their validation. This is at the beginning of the validation, which in a regular management system language is called as a certification audit at the initial year. So if the validation opinion is proven to be positive, then this allows for the project to register in that particular climate program registry with a unique identification number. So again, the registry can vary, however the project proponent chooses to adopt from the CDM until the different climate programs. Then the verification starts from the second year once the project is successfully registered. So the verification is to determine the information from the project documents and the actual emission reductions achieved by the project, the monitoring mechanisms and the data collection methods from the VVB to ensure that the project has successfully achieved what they have already been validated and determined to reduce on the greenhouse gas emissions. So the VVB conducts an independent assessment again from the second year. This consecutively goes into 4 years and issues a verification report again with the positive verification statement or a negative verification statement. If there is a positive verification statement, that enables the project for the emission reduction calculations and to be eligible for the carbon credits of the project in that specific climate program what the project has adopted. And I would also like to emphasize here on 2 different kinds of carbon credits. One is the certified emission reductions, and second one is the voluntary emission reductions. So certified emission reductions, they are ratified by the Kyoto Protocol, and the country level governments have committed themselves under the Kyoto Protocol to achieve certain levels of emission reductions. And they implement different mechanisms, the regulatory policies, and any changes in the manufacturing sector that needs to be done to achieve these regulatory policies and overall the emission reductions that are committed by these governments in the Kyoto Protocol. So provisions for facilitating also the carbon dioxide emission allowance, it allows for the market to establish under the Paris Agreement. So offsetting emissions from the CR projects can also be counted towards meeting the targets set out in these CARs. So the voluntary emission reductions are, it's basically the voluntary market. It allows the people or the voluntary market to offset their own emissions and to declare themselves or their production process or the activities in achieving certain levels of emission reductions committed by the specific government. And they can also trade their carbon credits in the market voluntarily. So these type of carbon credits can be created under the same standards as CRs. Basically, it's the same mechanism, but VRs are completely independent of the government commitment, and they can trade internationally under the Kyoto Protocol. In the carbon neutral projects, I wanted to also emphasize that it's a certification but it is valid for the 12-month assessment period. So the maintenance of carbon neutral status has to be assessed annually by certification bodies to see if the company, as what it is determined as carbon neutral targets, it is achieving every annual or not, by the mechanisms I already defined in the presentation. I would also like to tell that when you're saying carbon credits, basically it is nothing but it's 1,000 kilo of carbon dioxide, which is equivalent to 1 carbon credit. You know, it's a basic mechanism how they calculate the carbon credits. Anything in particular from the forum on these are just basics, but if you'd like to understand more on carbon neutral projects, how this can be achieved, and who are the ones who are eligible to certify carbon neutral projects, or if you want to understand more on the carbon credits market, and how the VVPs are validating and verifying, and who to contact in the VVPs, probably I could share some guidance, but it is your voluntary decision if you want to go with it or not. And also I would like to emphasize that we are coming up with the ICR, Indian Carbon Registry, very shortly, which will also define its own methodology and guidance to enable projects, small scale projects, to be eligible to achieve its emission reductions and to trade its carbon credits to its platform. So if you need any more information on this, feel free to contact me. Mr. Giridharan can share my contact details to whoever is interested. And I would like to show some light if it helps you.
Thanks, Sakana. I could understand the tough situation where you are now making this presentation. You are traveling in Europe, and during your traveling, you are able to do this in a mind-blowing presentation on this carbon footprint audits. And we are happy to hear your experiences on your carbon footprint audits and all the things. Thank you. Thanks for effort you have taken across. And participants, we will arrange to share the PowerPoint presentation, or we will share the recording link also, from where you can get all the details. And we will share all the contact details of Ms. Sahana as well as Mr. Ram Kumar to you. And on behalf of CCC, I am very much thankful to all the participants who are here for the past 1.5 hours, taking your efforts and patience in looking across these two presentations. And CCC has committed to conduct a lot of such knowledge transfer programs. And you can write to the secretariat, the email ID where you have received the presentation regarding the various other topics that you are liking it. And we are happy to meet you very shortly on another new topic. Thank you all. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the presentation done by Ms. Sahana as well as Mr. Ram Kumar. Thank you all. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Giridhar.
sir. Thank you so
you, sir.
much.
Thank you, Sahana.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please share the details of presenters.
Sure, we will arrange to share it, sir, very shortly. We will share the recording
you,
as
sir.
well as the contact details. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Sir,
Thank
I
you.
have
Thank you.
added. I have added my mail ID. Can you help to send?
Sir, I am putting my mobile number. You can take it
Yes, sir.
across and you can send your requirements. I will be able to send it shortly.
Oh,
Okay,
nice.
sir.
One second.
It's 98402 84489.
Oh, so nice of you, sir. Really.
Thank you.
So nice of you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Giri sir. Thank you for that.
Okay, thanks a
comparing.
lot,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Sir, once repeat the
Thank you.
number 98402.
84489.
Thank you, sir.
Please,
Thank you.
you may share on management system group of the WhatsApp.
This is my WhatsApp number also. You can send the message.
No, what I'm saying, there is one group of consultants, na, management system.
Yes, yes.
If you will share, then everyone will get from there.
We will discuss that because there is some privilege has to be given for the persons who are registered for the program.
Yeah,
We will
sir.
see.
Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you all. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.